I used to believe that love, real love, could weather any storm. That if you were loyal, patient, and gave your whole heart, things would always work out. That belief shattered one snowy evening in Chicago, the city where dreams are built, and sometimes, where they fall apart. I'm Michael Carter, 34 years old at the time, working long hours as an architect, chasing not just blueprints, but a future I thought I was building with the woman I loved, Emily Sanders. Emily wasn't always like the person she became. When we first met at a coffee shop off Michigan Avenue, she was warm, full of life, and had this spark that made you believe anything was possible. But maybe, just maybe, that spark was never about us, it was about more. More than I could ever give. Looking back, there were signs. There always are, right? The way her eyes lingered on the luxury boutiques when we strolled down Oak Street, or how birthdays became less about memories and more about price tags. But love makes you blind, or worse, it makes you willing. I told myself that her dreams of a better life were just ambitions, not greed. That wanting nice things didn't mean she didn't value me. I stretched my budget, skipped my own needs, thinking, it's just a phase. We all want comfort. But comfort for Emily wasn't about stability, it was about status. The night everything changed wasn't filled with shouting or dramatic confrontations like in the movies. No. It was quiet. Too quiet. I came home early from a project meeting, snow still melting on my coat, to the sound of laughter in our apartment. Hers, and a voice I didn't recognize. What I heard next didn't just break my heart, it rewired the way I understood people, trust, and myself. And here's the thing nobody tells you, betrayal doesn't just hurt because someone lied to you. It hurts because you realize how much you lied to yourself. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about seeing clearly for the first time, about understanding that sometimes, love isn't enough, especially when you're the only one holding on. But what I didn't know that night was, the truth was far more complicated than just another man. There was a choice Emily made, one that would leave me questioning not only our relationship but everything I thought I knew about loyalty, responsibility, and forgiveness. So, let me take you back to that night in Chicago, where the snow covered the streets, but couldn't cover the truth. The snow was still clinging to my boots when I stepped into our apartment that night. The familiar scent of Emily's vanilla candles filled the air, but instead of feeling comforted, I felt uneasy. I hadn't told her I was coming home early. The meeting wrapped up faster than expected, and for a moment, I thought surprising her with takeout from her favorite Italian place would brighten her evening. But as I closed the door softly behind me, I heard voices, two voices. Emily's soft laughter echoed from the living room, but it was the deep, unfamiliar male voice that made me pause mid-step. My heart began to race, but my mind, desperate to cling to normalcy, whispered excuses. Maybe it's just a friend. Maybe it's her cousin visiting. I moved quietly down the hallway, the carpet muffling my footsteps. That's when I heard it, clear as day. So, when are you going to tell him? The man asked, his tone casual, almost amused. There was a pause. I could hear Emily exhale, the kind of sigh that carries the weight of secrets. I don't know, Ryan, she said quietly. Michael still thinks this baby is his. The world around me seemed to tilt. My ears rang, as if my body refused to process the words. Baby? Emily wasn't pregnant, or at least, she hadn't told me she was. I pressed my back against the wall, every muscle tense, my mind scrambling for explanations I knew didn't exist. Ryan chuckled, low and confident. You're playing a dangerous game, Em. Her voice trembled slightly, not with guilt, but with frustration. What choice do I have? You said you weren't ready for this. I can't do this alone. Another pause. I could hear ice clinking in a glass, Ryan taking a sip of whatever drink he felt comfortable enough to pour himself in my home. Michael's a good guy, Ryan said finally. He'll step up. He always does. That was when I realized, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. This was calculated. A plan. I wasn't just being cheated on, I was being set up to become the father of a child that wasn't mine. Emily's next words cut deeper than I thought possible. Exactly. Michael's safe. He's reliable. He'll never leave, no matter what. You and I both know he's too good-hearted for that. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My loyalty, my love, everything I had prided myself on, had been reduced to a safety net. I wasn't a partner in Emily's eyes. I was a backup plan. Ryan laughed again, standing up by the sound of it. Well, good luck keeping up the act. I heard footsteps approaching, and I snapped out of my paralysis, slipping quietly into the shadow of the hallway. Ryan grabbed his coat and headed for the door, never noticing me standing just feet away, invisible in my own life. When the door clicked shut behind him, I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew. She was fixing herself a drink, completely unaware that her carefully constructed lies had just crumbled. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I watched for a moment longer, realizing something that chilled me to the bone. Emily didn't look guilty. She looked relieved. Like a weight had been lifted now that Ryan was gone. It was in that moment I understood, this wasn't just betrayal. It was survival, for her. Emily wasn't driven by love or even lust. She was driven by fear, fear of being alone, fear of losing the lifestyle she thought she deserved. And I was just collateral damage in her fight to stay afloat. As I finally stepped into the room, Emily turned, her face paling when she saw me, like she'd seen a ghost. In a way, she had. Because the man standing before her wasn't the same Michael who left that morning. That Michael still believed in us. This Michael? He had just woken up to reality. Emily stood frozen, her fingers still wrapped around the glass of wine she'd just poured. Her lips parted slightly, as if searching for the right words, words that could erase what I had just heard. But there were none. I closed the distance between us slowly, my gaze locked on hers, not with rage, but with something far worse, clarity. Is there anything you'd like to tell me, Emily? My voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes when anger has burned out, leaving only the cold ashes of disappointment. She swallowed hard, her knuckles whitening around the glass. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, spin another web of lies. But then her shoulders sagged, and she looked away, as if the floor held the answers she couldn't give. I was going to tell you, she whispered. I let out a bitter laugh. When? After I signed the birth certificate? Her eyes flashed with something, defensiveness, perhaps. I didn't plan for this to happen, Michael. It just did. It just did. I echoed, shaking my head. Sleeping with someone else doesn't just happen, Emily. And getting pregnant? That's a choice. She set the glass down with trembling hands, finally meeting my gaze. There were no tears, just exhaustion, like she was tired of pretending. I'm pregnant, she said flatly, as if stating the weather. And I don't know if it's yours. There it was, the truth, stripped of all pretense. No apologies. No sugarcoating. Just cold, hard reality. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavier than any scream could have been. When I finally found my voice, it came out quieter than I expected. Why, Emily? Why him? Why, this? She hesitated, then gave a small, almost sad smile. Because Ryan offered something you couldn't. I felt my stomach twist, but I forced myself to ask, which is? Her answer came without hesitation. Security. The word hit harder than any insult. After everything I'd given, every late night, every sacrifice, I was still seen as unstable. Not enough. I thought we were building a life together, I said, my voice cracking despite myself. Emily sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like we were discussing something as mundane as rent. Michael, you're a good man. You have dreams. But dreams don't pay for lakefront condos or designer strollers. I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman standing in front of me. The Emily I loved would have laughed at that sentence years ago, back when we shared cheap takeout on the floor of our first apartment, dreaming about the future. But that Emily was gone, if she ever truly existed. So, what was the plan? I asked, my tone sharp now. Keep me around as the dependable fool while you hedge your bets with Ryan? She flinched but didn't deny it. Instead, she crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. I did what I had to do. I can't raise a child on hope, Michael. The words stung because, deep down, I knew she believed them. This wasn't a moment of weakness, it was a calculated decision. Love, loyalty, those were luxuries Emily couldn't afford in her mind. And me? I was just the collateral in her pursuit of certainty. I took a step back, feeling the weight of finality settle in. I deserve better than being your safety net. Her expression softened for the briefest second, but she didn't argue. She knew it was true. I want a DNA test, I said firmly. And until then, we're done. Emily nodded slowly, as if she'd already prepared for this outcome. There were no pleas, no tears, just acceptance. As I walked out that night, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals aren't born from hatred or passion, but from fear. And fear had driven Emily to trade love for security. But I wouldn't be part of that bargain. The days after that confrontation felt surreal, like I was walking through someone else's life, watching it unravel from a distance. I moved out of the apartment within 48 hours. I couldn't stand the sight of the place where every corner whispered a lie I didn't see coming. Emily didn't fight it. In fact, she barely reacted, just nodded when I packed my things, as if she had already accepted that this was the cost of her choices. But even as I shut the door on our relationship, I couldn't shut out the thought that haunted me every night. What if the baby was mine? It wasn't about Emily anymore. It was about a child, one who hadn't asked to be born into a mess of betrayal and broken promises. So, a week later, I called her. Not to rekindle anything, not to revisit old wounds, but to lay down terms. We're doing a DNA test the moment the baby's born, I said, my tone firm, leaving no room for debate. There was a pause on the other end before Emily finally replied, her voice measured. Fine. I expected that. But before I could hang up, she added something that caught me off guard. Michael, if it is yours, what then? I hesitated. I hadn't let myself think that far ahead. The idea of co-parenting with someone I no longer trusted made my skin crawl. But I wasn't raised to abandon responsibility. If the child is mine, I said slowly, choosing every word with care, I'll be there, for them. But don't mistake that for us becoming a family again. Emily didn't argue. Maybe, in her own way, she respected that boundary, or maybe she simply knew better than to push. As the months dragged on, I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But behind every project deadline and every late-night coffee, there was that lingering uncertainty. I wasn't naive enough to hope. But I wasn't cold enough to detach completely. When Emily's due date approached, she sent me a brief message, at the hospital. It's a boy. I found myself standing outside the hospital room hours later, staring through the glass at a tiny bundle cradled in Emily's arms. She looked up, our eyes meeting for the first time in months. There was no warmth, just acknowledgement. Walking into that room was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Not because of Emily, but because of the wave of emotions I felt when I looked at the baby. He was innocent. Completely untouched by the lies and choices that had surrounded his existence. Do you want to hold him? Emily asked quietly. I hesitated before nodding. As I held the baby in my arms, something inside me shifted, not love, not yet, but a sense of duty, of understanding that sometimes, being a good man wasn't about grand gestures. It was about standing tall when everything else had fallen apart. But I didn't let that feeling cloud my judgment. "We'll do the test tomorrow," I said, my voice steady. Emily simply nodded, as if she too was bracing for the truth. That night, as I left the hospital, I realized that life had forced me into a position I never imagined, balancing compassion with self-respect. I wasn't there because I forgave Emily. I was there because he deserved clarity, even if that clarity would come with more pain. The DNA test came back within a week. Negative. I wasn't surprised. Deep down, I had known the truth long before the results were printed on that sterile piece of paper. Still, seeing it in black and white gave me a strange sense of closure, until Emily showed up at my door 2 days later. It was late, too late for casual visits. I opened the door to find her standing there, cradling the baby in one arm, dark circles under her eyes, and a look I hadn't seen before. Not arrogance. Not indifference. Desperation. "Michael, can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I should have closed the door. Every instinct told me to protect what little peace I had managed to rebuild. But then the baby stirred in her arms, letting out a soft cry, and against my better judgment, I stepped aside. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on both of us. Emily gently rocked the baby, avoiding my gaze until finally, she broke the tension. "I know what the test said," she began, her voice shaking. "But I don't know where else to turn." I stayed quiet, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. "I made mistakes. I know that. But Michael, you know me better than anyone. You know I didn't do this to hurt you." I let out a hollow laugh. "You didn't mean to hurt me? Emily, you didn't care if you did." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the girl I once knew, the one who used to dream about simple things, before ambition swallowed her whole. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "You don't understand what it's like, the pressure to keep up, to not fall behind. Everywhere I look, people are building lives I could only dream of. I was scared, Michael. Scared of being left with nothing." Her words hit differently this time. Not because I forgave her, but because I finally understood. Emily wasn't just a villain in my story, she was a product of a world that measures worth in bank accounts and status symbols. But understanding didn't erase the past. "So what now?" I asked, my voice steady. "You want me to step in? Play house? Pretend none of this happened?" She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "No. I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't walk away when things get hard." I stared at her, feeling the old parts of me, the parts that wanted to fix things, to be the good guy, rise to the surface. But then I remembered standing in that hallway, hearing her call me safe, like I was nothing more than a fallback plan. I looked down at the baby, innocent, oblivious to the storm around him, and felt a pang of guilt. Not for Emily. For him. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But I'm not your answer, Emily. I can't be." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands, the weight of reality crashing down around her. "Please. I don't have anyone else." I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "You had choices, Emily. You just didn't like where they led." As I walked her to the door, I felt the tension in my chest ease, not because this was easy, but because I knew I was making the right decision. Compassion doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for someone who wouldn't do the same. That night, as the door closed behind her for the last time, I realized that sometimes, the hardest thing isn't forgiving someone else. It's forgiving yourself for caring too long. Weeks passed after that final conversation. I focused on piecing my life back together, small steps, like dinners alone without feeling the weight of absence, or walking past baby stores without that sinking feeling in my chest. I thought I was done with Emily's story. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that closure isn't always on your terms. One afternoon, I got a call from Rachel, a mutual friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Her voice was hesitant, laced with something between concern and curiosity. "Michael, have you heard about Emily?" I felt my stomach tighten. "No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way." But Rachel wasn't calling for gossip. "I think you should know. Ryan isn't the father either." Her words hung in the air, surreal and heavy. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Rachel sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Word got around. Apparently, Ryan demanded his own paternity test after you did. Same result, he's not the father." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. If it wasn't me, and it wasn't Ryan. There was only one explanation. Emily had been hiding more than just one affair. Rachel's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Michael. I know this isn't your problem anymore, but I thought you deserved to know." After I hung up, I sat in silence, staring at nothing. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't even surprised, if I was honest with myself. The signs had always been there. I just never wanted to believe that someone I loved could be so lost. A few days later, out of something between morbid curiosity and lingering closure, I found myself walking past the small park near Emily's new apartment. That's when I saw her, sitting alone on a bench, the baby in a stroller beside her. She looked different. Not in the way people do after heartbreak, but in the way someone looks when they've finally run out of excuses. For a moment, I considered walking away. But something in me, maybe the part that still needed answers, pushed me forward. She noticed me approaching and gave a tired, almost defeated smile. "Rachel told you, didn't she?" she said before I could speak. I nodded slowly. "Why, Emily? Why lie to both of us?" She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Because when you start lying, Michael, it gets easier. One turns into two, and before you know it, you don't even recognize yourself anymore." Her honesty caught me off guard. There was no fight left in her, just acceptance of the wreckage she'd caused. "Who's the father?" I asked quietly, though part of me didn't really want to know. She looked down at her hands, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't matter. He's gone. Just like everyone else." For the first time, I didn't see Emily as the person who betrayed me. I saw her as someone trapped by her own choices, chasing security so desperately that she'd sacrificed every genuine connection she had. I glanced at the baby, innocent as ever, and felt that familiar pang of sadness. Not for me. For him. "I hope you figure things out," I said softly, turning to leave. As I walked away, Emily called out one last time. "Michael. I never meant to hurt you." I didn't turn back. I just kept walking, knowing that some truths aren't meant to bring pain, they're meant to set you free. And in that moment, I realized the real twist wasn't that Emily had lied about who the father was. It was that, somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of who she was. Months turned into a year. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but slowly, it stopped showing up every morning like an unwanted guest. I began to reclaim my time, my peace, my sense of self. I redecorated my apartment, not just to erase memories, but to create new ones. I started running again, not to escape, but to move forward, one step, one breath, one sunrise at a time. And then, life did what it always does when we're finally ready, it surprised me. Her name was Claire. We met at a community art event downtown, both reaching for the same ceramic bowl. We laughed, made small talk, and before I knew it, she was someone I looked forward to seeing again. Claire wasn't flashy. She didn't wear designer labels or talk about investment portfolios. She talked about books, her garden, and how she rescued a three-legged dog named Theo. There was no pretense. No agenda. Just warmth. And truth. And that's when I realized the biggest lesson of all: love doesn't demand that you lose yourself. It meets you where you are, and it lets you grow. Looking back, I don't regret what happened with Emily. Not because it didn't hurt, it did. But because it taught me who I was, and more importantly, who I refused to become. I learned that loyalty means nothing if it's only one-sided. Compassion is powerful, but it shouldn't cost your dignity. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to walk away from the person you once thought you couldn't live without. Life isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning how to heal from it and come out stronger. If you've ever felt betrayed, misunderstood, or used, please know this: you are not alone. And more than that, you are not broken. You are evolving. Now, if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of something you've been through or helped you see something a little clearer, we'd be honored if you could support our work. Click the like button, it helps more than you know. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story that might just shift your perspective. And most of all, share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Our team pours heart and soul into every story, because we believe that storytelling isn't just entertainment, it's healing. Thank you for spending these moments with us. And until next time, take care of your heart. You never know who might fall in love with the version of you that finally decided to choose yourself.